Well, last week on Meet the Press, Wayne LaPierre, the head of the National Rifle Association, he didn't want to focus on any of those issues. He wanted to talk about protecting kids in schools. And he suggested the way to do that is to put armed police officers in every school in the country. Wayne LaPierre was described by many people as crazy for suggesting this. It would cost $2 billion. It would be difficult to do. How would you train everybody? But Wayne LaPierre stood by and doubled down and said, look, this is what I believe. And here's what else he said.
If it's crazy to call for putting police and armed security in our school to protect our children, then call me crazy. I'll tell you what, I think the American people think it's crazy not to do it. It's the one thing that would keep people safe, and the NRA is going to try to do that.
LaPierre also responded to the idea that, well, this will somehow create a police state, and he's pointed out, and a lot of gun advocates have pointed out, I've even pointed out, we already have weapons in airports with the TSA and with security systems. We already have gun-toting police in places like Penn Station, Washington, D.C.'s Union Station. You can go to shopping malls now in the holidays and you can find armed police. You can even find police in many schools. So the idea that, well, we're turning into a police state, a lot of gun advocates, people on the right say, well, we're already there. And Wayne LaPierre pointed out that the media, he argues, is being somewhat hypocritical on this because he says in some of his stops, some media organizations are also using armed guards to try to make sure that gunmen don't burst into the studio and take over the airwaves. So here's what else he said about that.
Most of the media, when I go around this country, they're protected by armed guards. Why can't we protect their most precious resource? Look, there was a Secret Service study that was done, okay? You know what it showed? It showed that the police, trying to get there in time, only stopped 25% of the shooters. The rest of them are either stopped by somebody in the system or they turn the gun on themselves. That's a pretty darn good argument for putting a good guy in the system somewhere with a gun to help our kids.
And again, put a good guy in the system to help our kids. That's his argument of Wayne LaPierre. I'm not so sure that that necessarily will work. I mean, there was a good guy at Columbine, the guy at Columbine who fired shots at the shooters, but they still managed to kill a bunch of kids there. So just having police in schools may not necessarily help you. What I think most Americans would agree would help all of us is if we make it more difficult for kids to get weapons they're not supposed to have, to make it more difficult for them to buy these ammunition clips so they can have 30 rounds in one magazine, to make it more difficult to get assault weapons. Daniel Marins, what do you make of the political strategy, though? Wayne LaPierre continuing, doubling down, even though he knows that people are calling him crazy by focusing on just the issue of schools. What do you make of the politics of trying to say, okay, it's the media, it's the liberal media that wants to demean gun owners, and we're the ones who are coming up with sensible solutions on how to protect our kids?
I think in the short term, it's obviously very smart, very clever. The fact that he can then actually literally turn to the media and say, look, you guys have armed guards too, is obviously very advantageous for him in this debate. But I think that when we see the legislative battle play out in which Wayne LaPierre and the NRA are using their full force in ads, in money, and just general political power to oppose basic common sense gun regulation, like the assault weapons ban, like a ban on high-capacity magazines, like enforcement of background checks, then you're going to see that this is going to blow up in the NRA's face. I really do think, we had Ari Rabenhoft on the air this past Saturday, last show, and he basically said that this is another case of the conservative right-wing echo chamber not doing them any favors. They're not in tune with, I think, the mood in the country right now, and just generally they're going to be seen as insensitive, and they're ultimately going to lose political power due to this sort of anti-reform approach.
There's one guy who's very close to Wayne LaPierre in the United States Senate. Well, actually, there are a couple who are very close, but there's one key guy who's very close to Wayne LaPierre, and his name is Tom Coburn. He's a senator from, I believe it's Oklahoma. And Senator Coburn has said before, he's joked around about saying that he wishes that he could bring in a gun to the U.S. Senate. That's one of the places where, no, D.C., you're not allowed to bring a gun in the U.S. Senate. Capitol Hill Police won't allow it. He has always towed the line for the National Rifle Association, and one of the fears that a lot of members of the Senate have is that you can gum up the U.S. Senate, you can slow things down, you can prevent legislation with just a single vote. So there have been a number of pieces, a number of profiles on Senator Tom Coburn. There's a way, though, that everybody can take action to even pressure Senator Tom Coburn. If you call Senator Tom Coburn or use PopVox and contact him, particularly for our listeners in Oklahoma who are constituents, and you say, wait a second, it's fine to protect the Second Amendment, but now is the time when you should allow the will of the American people, allow a straight up or down vote. Don't use Senate parliamentarian rules. Don't use these sort of strange tactics to even prevent an up or down vote on banning ammunition clips, banning assault weapons, and closing the gun show loophole. A lot of senators, a lot of members of Congress are saying if we can just get a straight up or down vote in both chambers, we can get this stuff passed. The question is Tom Coburn willing to allow a straight up or down vote, or is he going to say, well, wait a second, I'm not going to let that happen? Coming up, interesting story involving David Gregory from NBC and D.C.'s gun laws and a possible violation there and a possible black eye, both for NBC News and maybe even the D.C. Metropolitan Police. We'll talk about that ahead when Take Action News continues.